There's a danger if you ever stop learning. I think, one of the things I've loved about business is it forces me to learn and adopt. I think the skills you need to be a successful entrepreneur can all be learned. You typically, as a person, have some skills you're bringing to the table already. Maybe you're fantastic at HR and finance. Maybe you need to learn the skills around sales. Once you're an entrepreneur, you kind of have to be good at everything and have a really good baseline on all of it.
Hello and welcome back to Successes. I'm Phil Portman. And this is a podcast where we look past titles and money to define success on our own terms. Today, I'm joined by Alisa Sparks, founder and CEO of Linden Creek, who scaled a side hustle home staging business into a 20-location luxury franchise and views success as a lifelong journey of growth, leadership, and impact. Her path from managing multi-million-dollar defense budgets to building a luxury design brand is both unexpected and inspiring. This is a conversation about vision, courage, and what it really takes to build something meaningful. Thank you for joining us today, Alisa. Excited to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Phil. I'm excited to be here.
So what does success mean to you?
It's interesting. I would have given you a very different answer 5-10 years ago. But today, success for me means personal growth. I think early on in so many of our journeys, we think it's attainment of money or hitting this certain status or level. But somewhere along my journey of building this business, I realized something really interesting was happening as I grew. And that was personal growth. I became a different version of myself. I became a better version of myself every time I pushed through something difficult. And that journey and the results around it are really what I've fallen in love with and how I define success now today.
Yeah. And are there certain habits or behaviors that you do to focus on your personal growth and personal development?
I think there's a danger if you ever stop learning. I think, one of the things I've loved about business is it forces me to learn and adopt and adapt. I'm faced with a new challenge as the business grows, and all of a sudden I need to come up with that solution. And I may or may not have those skills yet. So it forces me to deep dive, whether it's reading a book or listening to a podcast or having a conversation with a fellow business owner or my Uber driver and giving me a unique perspective on how I can accomplish something new. I'm forced to continue to learn and develop and then use those skills. And that's where so much of that growth is coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. And so massive shift from government defense, contracts to luxury home staging. Can you kind of walk us through that journey and what happened there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a numbers geek at heart. You give me an Excel spreadsheet and I'll entertain myself for hours. So I love finance. I love math. And so it was a very clear decision for me when I graduated from college to go into the finance career. I had the opportunity to manage budgets for the Department of Defense and got to work with amazing men from the Navy and the Marine Corps as we kind of devised strategies for them for the long term. But there was something missing in that career. And so I found myself with this creative itch. And so when I finished my 9 to 5, I would try to figure out what creative thing I could accomplish in the evenings. And so I used to buy the ugliest house I could find because when I stepped into it, I saw what it could be. And so I would imagine how I could redesign spaces, how I could refinish flooring. And I'd renovate it over 2 years. And then as soon as it was done, I was like, well, that project's knocked out. I guess I have to sell the house and find the next ugly one to fall in love with. And so I found myself doing these things just because it was a love and a passion. And there was a day I was at the gym and I was running on the treadmill and listening to the Rich Dad Poor Dad audiobook. And I remember hearing him talk about the different types of dads that he had. One that had this safe W-2 and this other that was all about building assets and how a business is an asset. And it really reframed thinking for me. And I thought building a business is something that makes a lot of sense. But what on earth would I build? I love interior design. I don't have the degree. So clearly that can't be it. And as I was really digesting on all of this, I had this aha moment as I was in the process of selling one of the houses I renovated. And they said, the staging is fantastic, but it wasn't staging. It was just the furniture that I collected over the years. But I realized I could probably stage houses. And so that really started the thought process of building a business primarily around home staging, or originally that's what I thought. And so at that moment, there was a lot of self-doubt. Like, can this actually be something real? Is there the ability for it? Does the market want it? So I would take PTO on Fridays, and I would go knock on as many doors as I could on my Fridays to home builders as well as real estate agents, and see if anybody had interest in the services that I wanted to provide. And the answer was yes. So about 4 months into the business, found myself in a position where I was growing so rapidly, I had to make the decision of leaving my full-time career and jumping into this new business entrepreneurship journey, and made the decision to do so.
Yeah, so that takes some pretty serious guts, right? Especially for somebody who's very numbers, very rational driven to jump. I mean, how did you know it was safe to make the leave so quickly? I mean, 4 months, that's kind of crazy, right? Especially for someone as rational as you, going from government contracting to I'm just going to take the plunge. Can you walk us through that mentally?
Yeah, I don't think the answer was like, I did the math and it totally worked, and I was 100% confident that this business idea was going to work. I think the reality is I looked at my savings account and I was like, if I really am bad at this, there's enough money in here for me to make a few mistakes for several months before I really end up in trouble. And this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. If I don't take this risk now, I'm never going to make it. But the worst that happens is I fail. And I remember having the conversation with my employers at the time at the Department of Defense. And I was like, listen, I know this is going to sound weird, but I'm going to start a staging company instead. And they kind of looked at me like, we didn't even know you liked decorating. And I was like, yeah, it turns out I really do. And they're like, hey, if it doesn't work out, Alisa, like, give us a call, we'll take you back. And so there was this part of me in the back of my brain that was like, if I really fail, like, I can always go back to that corporate setting. I can always figure this out. But there was also this part of it where when they looked at me and they were like, are you sure about this? I thought, I have to prove them wrong. Like, it's all the more reason to be like, yes, I can do this. And so it was a whole lot of determination and grit of just, I'm going to find a way to make this work.
Absolutely. And I love it. How'd your family and like peers and stuff, how'd they react when you said, I'm leaving this stable government contracting job to stage houses?
I don't think they knew what to think. They were just like, we've watched you flip houses. We've watched you do, build furniture and sell it because you were bored and antsy. We're not surprised you want to go down the creative realm. We'll see what happens. But even in making that pivot, I remember I was talking with one of my former colleagues from the Department of Defense about a year and a half, 2 years after I had started. And she looked at me, and my business was growing, but because of its growth, like, I wasn't bringing a lot of money home. I was really reinvesting into its growth. And she looked at me and she goes, if you had stayed with us, you'd be making six figures in this beautiful whatever with all these benefits and have this new promotion. Like, you were lined up to get all of that and all this PTO and all these things. And she's like, do you ever think that maybe you made a mistake, Alisa? And I remember looking at her and thinking, I absolutely didn't, because even though my compensation wasn't what it could have been at that very moment, I knew the potential of where it could be. And I knew the flexibility that I had and how much I loved what I did, that it was a no-brainer to me. And like, all the more motivation to be like, let me make sure that this is a worthwhile decision.
Yeah. And incredible that you could take something that you just love doing and making a business at it. I mean, that's the most incredible part about it, and such a rare thing that someone's able to find. So I want to talk about, because you've now built it into a franchise with 20 locations nationwide. So what was the decision to end up franchising it? Can you kind of walk us through that process?
Yeah. So to make me sound even more crazy, a year into the business, my husband at the time and I got separated. So we separated from each other, have all the respect for him. It was just not the right fit. And so I found myself a single mom of two little girls that were 3 and 4. And it was my responsibility to pick them up from carpool every afternoon. And in that scenario, we had recently moved to the Raleigh area. So I didn't have any family or friends that I necessarily trusted yet. And so it was sort of this non-negotiable of, I have to be in carpool lane at 2:30 every day. And so to support that, I remember every time I'd start to get really busy in my day-to-day, I would hire somebody fast. I would teach them how to do the thing that I was doing at 2:30 in the afternoon. And then I would go and pick my kids up from school. And at the time I was like, this is going to make business growth more challenging. Like this is going to make success more challenging. But what was interesting is it forced me to delegate and train so much faster than I would have done had I had my own flexibility. If it was up to me and I didn't have that time commitment, honestly, I probably would have worked 10, 12-hour days every single day and never would have delegated. But instead, I found myself in a position where I was gladly teaching somebody how to take on these responsibilities. And as a result of that, about 5 years into the business, I had somebody running sales. We had a team of designers. We had customer support. We were really doing it all. And I remember looking at my calendar for the previous week and reflecting on what had happened for the week. And as I looked at it, I realized I had not contributed to anything that happened the entire week. Like I sat in on meetings, but no one needed me to be there.
That's incredible.
And then and it was great. And I looked at the week ahead and I was like, okay, how do I plan for the week? And I'm like, I could not show up and nothing's going to change. Everything will be just fine. And one should like see that moment and be like, I made it. Like now I drink margaritas by the pool. We're happy. This is amazing. Like this is the dream. But I love working. And so instead I panicked. I was like, there's no purpose for me. What am I going to do every day? What is my purpose? How do I add value to the world? And as I was reflecting on that, I was getting messages from others in the industry that had their own businesses that were like, Alisa, how do you handle pricing objections? Or how do you store your art in a warehouse so it doesn't get damaged as much? And I realized we created systems around these things, but I didn't realize that they were systems at the time. And so it made me really ponder. And I thought, how do I take this playbook we've really created? Because I found a way to replicate myself in what we did and give it to other people so that they could have success in a field that they loved too. And that's what brought on the idea of franchising.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. And I franchised a company myself years ago, and it requires having a system documenting everything. I couldn't imagine trying to document the creative aspect of design so that they can replicate the Linden Creek standards. How do you do that? I mean, yeah, I get the other parts of the business, but the creative aspect, how do you document and systemize that type of thing?
Yeah, I asked myself that same question when I first started going down that journey. I was like, can I do this? Like, don't you just walk in and design a space? But as I stopped it to think about it, I realized I had designed using my math brain this whole time. So when I walk into a room, I measure the room and then I subtract a certain number of inches to come up with my rug size. And once I have that rug size, I know that I can use one of 4 different floor plans for my furniture layout of sofas and chairs or a sectional. And once I pick that floor plan, now I'm going to pick out one of the couches and one of the chairs from my inventory that I think is going to be nice in the space. And that's it. And so what I realized is we really did have systems to spatial planning and strategies around that. And then we also built brand standards around how we design and style our accessories. So one of the things we did as we started franchising is building accessory sets. So if you think about what you might put on your coffee table, oftentimes designing the pieces that go on your coffee table are far more time consuming than like picking out your sofa and your chairs. And so we figured if we could build pre-created sets, it would allow anybody with zero design experience to go, that's the coffee table set I want. They put it on the coffee table. There's a picture of exactly how it should be displayed. And then they've nailed the mixture of textures and materials and shapes that are really necessary to make that space look beautiful.
I love that because with me and my wife, she's typically the creative one, and I'm the one that's like, I don't know. I mean, she'll decorate a part of our house, and I could walk past it for 6 months and never even notice it changed at all. So I would be somebody that would need like, this is mapped out very specific for me to follow it. So being a tech guy, I want to talk about Arched. You dove into the tech field. So what gap in the market did you see that you designed to build your own platform like that?
Yeah, so when we were managing our day-to-day and I was just Raleigh, I remember operating off of like 2 different software solutions, plus 3 different Excel spreadsheets just to manage my day to day. And in that process, found that like the administrative time oftentimes was half of my time spent throughout the day was just like, where is this house now? Have there been changes? Did I email this client about this change yet? How do we need to update the schedule? And it just felt wasteful to me. But like, what are you going to do about that? You don't build a tech platform to solve that. But then when we made the decision to franchise, all of a sudden it opened up this opportunity of there's this pain in the market that I have felt the last 5 years that I've been building my business, that if I can solve this for not just myself, but for a bunch of other people, there's value in it then. And so I went down a deep hole of building a software platform that was going to allow us to handle our inventory management, to handle the CRM and the invoicing, to automate so much of the client communication, not the stuff that mattered, but the little reminders of send me your lockbox code, so that when I am communicating with my client, it's actually value added conversations that are beneficial, not these nuanced emails that I'm sending to every person every single day.
Yeah, absolutely. So managing multiple businesses can certainly be difficult. I've experienced that myself, and managing your focus. How do you shift hats between those different roles, or is your position in these companies relatively similar?
Yeah, my position in these companies are all a little bit different. They're in different seasons and phases. And so some of them I'm sitting still heavy in development and product testing. Others I'm in nuances where I've got a whole leadership team and I'm just making final judgment calls on. So it is a lot of shifting of hats. I think sometimes I try to strategically think through my schedule and go, today's a day that we're focusing on this. Today's a day we're focusing on this, and really categorizing those things. But that doesn't change the fact that my inbox has 5 different emails on 5 totally different topics. I think it just comes down to learning that when you're a business owner of multiple businesses and multiple business styles, you just have to learn to wear a lot of hats and to pivot from one thing to another. It probably makes us a little bit like ADD, like we're jumping all over the place to the point now that it feels natural. And if you like keep me streamlined on one topic, I'm like, what do we do with this? We're only talking about one lane. So I think it's a muscle you probably build in your brain at some point in time that allows you to kind of pivot and navigate and go from one thing to the next. But I love it. It's exciting. It's a challenge every day. It forces you to be on your toes and well caffeinated. And so I'm here for it.
Absolutely. And figure out what you can and can't do, or what you should and shouldn't do, right? That sort of thing.
Yes,
Automate or delegate it, right?
that's right.
And so you also have the shop, right? We haven't even gotten into that, which is your, online destination for curated decor. How does the retail side feed the service side of your business? And is there kind of some back and forth between that?
Yeah, there's a huge back and forth between that. So for us, when we started franchising, the question came into 2 questions came in. One is, how do we get these products to our franchisees at the prices we're getting them for, so that they can receive discounts on their products? And the second question was, how do we create brand consistency across all these markets? And the Linden Creek shop was the answer for that. So it is a provider and a source for our franchisees to have access to designs that we have created for products that we have tested, and we can say it's not too heavy, it functions well in a home, it has the versatility, but allows us at each location to have a similar look and feel. But in addition to that, what we found is oftentimes consumers will come and tour our homes and fall in love with something in the space. And so this gives any homeowner access to be able to purchase these products and bring them into their own homes when the time is right.
So I've heard both sides from different people. Some people say, entrepreneurship is something that you can learn. It's a skill that you can develop. Other people say, no, it's just in it. If you don't have it, stay away from it. Keep a normal job. Being somebody who's been on both sides of it, what's your perspective on it? Is it a skill that can be learned, or is it something that, if you don't have it in you, kind of stay away from it?
I think the skills you need to be a successful entrepreneur can all be learned. You typically, as a person, have some skills you're bringing to the table already. Maybe you're fantastic at HR and finance. Maybe you need to learn the skills around sales. Once you're an entrepreneur, you kind of have to be good at everything and have a really good baseline on all of it. Those are skills that are definitely trainable. I think where the nuance comes in entrepreneurship is it takes an insane amount of guts and this like dysmorphic belief that you're going to be successful. So statistics say that like nine out of 10 businesses fail in the first 5 years, right? So if you're starting a business, the question then goes, aren't you going to be the majority and more than likely fail and close your doors? But every entrepreneur has this insatiable belief that they're going to be the one that's going to be successful. And they're the ones that get knocked down a lot of times and somehow are not discouraged by that. They just like bounce back up and work harder at it. And so I think it's less of like, do you have the skills or not? You can learn the skills, but are you willing to take on that gut belief that you're going to be successful and that ability to withstand the pain and the punches that are going to come your way along that journey? And if the answer is yes, because that reward and that growth is worth it, then hands down, anybody can be an entrepreneur in that respect.
Yeah, no, absolutely. A lot of that, I call it arrogant confidence in my book.
Yes.
It's like this, you know what I mean? It's this level that like, you shouldn't be doing that, but you just keep going.
Right.
You
Yes.
get knocked down, you just keep going, So another thing that I talk about in my 3 keys to success is healthy habits. And I'm always interested to hear about what people's healthy habits look like. Do you have like a daily routine that helps you manage multiple ventures, your mental health, that sort of thing? And then on the flip side, are there certain habits that you try to avoid, try to stay away from, time sucks and that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a couple of habits that I try to focus on. My health matters. I always say my goal is to be 120 years old, and maybe with the help of AI and all these amazing supplements happening, it might happen. But so, constant awareness of where your health is sitting and what's going on is key. I get my blood work done once a quarter so that I have a baseline. And honestly, it's a really good way to reflect and go, hey, maybe you were pushing it too hard last quarter because these numbers have all dropped and you're seeing challenges, or you're doing all the right things. And so for me, it's like a health scorecard to really assess and see what I'm doing, to make sure that I don't push myself too hard. I have the tendency to take all the sacrifices, to forget to feed myself, to be so engulfed in my work that I put myself to the side. And that is a way that it forces me to stay in check and stay in balance in that respect. So that's one key thing. I would say another piece of it is I have found that there are seasons that I need to be intentional about carving out time for quiet and thoughtfulness. For me, that often means travel. So I love on a Sunday stepping away from work to just breathe and be somewhere different. And if that is getting in my car and driving for an hour to go to a flea market just to walk around, so be it. If it's getting away for a weekend to go somewhere and travel and talk to and have conversations with others, so be it. And I also find, as strange as it is, my intent is to not work, but I find I often reflect on work during that time. And the most creative problem-solving solutions actually happen as a result of me getting out of my environment. But I also feel rested and rejuvenated and like ready to really conquer the Monday that's going to be ahead of me.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more. I actually started blocking time that I say I'm doing nothing, but it's activities where I can not focus on anything. I don't know how to describe it. Go for a walk, relax, things like that, because that's when all of the day's stimulus and information has a chance to kind of process in my brain, and suddenly I'll come back with a solution to something that's been troubling me. So absolutely.
It's wild how that happens every time it's the stepping away that allows your brain to like change and shift and find those solutions.
Yeah. And I tell people, like, if the only time that you're like coming up with those solutions and stuff is right when you're laying in bed or when you're standing in the shower, you need to apply more time where you're not doing anything, right? Because look at the internet and everything that goes on today. You get so much information overload. Your brain never gets a chance to just sit there and kind of process it. So
yeah, that's exactly right.
So your bio mentioned a love of travel. Does your travel inspire your design collections for the shop and your other things?
It does to some degree. So we do enjoy seeing that to build and create some of our designs. But I would say more than anything, I love travel because it inspires me from an educational standpoint. There is nothing I love more than having conversations with strangers I've never met from a totally different culture or experience that allows me to see my world, my challenges, my problems, my blessings in a totally different light. And so I think for me, I love it from an educational standpoint. I find that I grow the most as a business professional, oftentimes from those conversations and from those travels and those opportunities to just see something different. For example, my husband and I were in Belize not too long ago together traveling, and I loved it. But my takeaway continuously from it was the amount of hospitality and kindness that I was blown away by. And so I found myself sitting there analyzing, like, what about it makes it so hospitable? Why do I feel that people are so kind? How could we integrate these little takeaways? Is it the way that their faces are smiling? Is it the way that they're introducing themselves or saying something to me? Like, what are the nuances that make this experience feel exceptional? And how do we bring that back home into our own business so that we're delivering that level of hospitality?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's crazy how just shaking up your world and putting yourself in a different perspective and seeing things through other people's eyes can just get like some of the creative and ideation things going. And yeah, I found the same thing. If you're living in a certain part of the world and you don't travel that often, you're just seeing this little itty bitty tiny perspective of the world. And not only does it help challenge you, but the other side to it too is that you don't really understand what you're grateful for until you've seen, what
Yeah.
like what real poverty looks like.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
our people here in the United States that are even homeless, I mean, are significantly better off than some of the poverty I've seen in India and things like
Yeah.
that, right? It's just a different level. Um, so getting back onto the success subject real quick, a lot of people that I talk to, they get stuck on this idea that success is a kind of a finite, rigid goal, right? It's a rigid number. Like if I hit this, then I know I've reached success. And you talked about like people even in your previous world saying, well, you'd be six figures and you'd be this PTO and all that stuff. And like that's a level of success. And for you, it's all about like personal and professional growth. For somebody who's seen their life as success being a static thing, what advice would you have for them?
One thing that I would say from that perspective is when that was my framework and I hit that level of success in, whatever that finite goal was, all of a sudden the purpose disappeared. It was like, okay, cool, I did it, but now what is the big question? And as humans, I think we need a purpose, and we need to keep striving for something because that's how we were made. And so for me, all of a sudden, when I hit okay, I hit this is beautiful, but now what? The conversation fell so much more around impact. So how do I impact as many lives as possible in the most beautiful way? And that really became my why. But it forced me to then have this new journey and have this new goal. And so I found that success oftentimes is tied to a finite goal, but that finite goal just keeps moving and growing and changing. And the moment that it stops changing is the moment that we as humans become stagnant. Like they say, when individuals retire, oftentimes they really start declining mentally and physically very quickly after because they stop moving and pushing towards something. And so for me, I think somewhere along the journey, I realized that success has nothing to do with monetary gains or status or titles, but it is about the journey. It is about the growth. It is about putting yourself in uncomfortable situations again and again, because that's where the growth and the change happens. It's about creating this new version of yourself that you didn't even think was possible. And that's what gets me excited. And so it's an ongoing journey of success. And it excites me and invigorates me to think that the person that I am today is going to be drastically different than the person that I'm going to build of myself in 5 years or 10 years. And that kind of success is what is exciting because it's all about the growth journey.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. And it's interesting too, when you look back, some of the best stories that you have are when things went horribly wrong, right? And I always like reflect on that. I think like years from now, like this is going to be a really good story. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it kind of helps put you in a larger perspective that like you're not drowning, you're not going to die. This is just a thing that you're going to get through. But what do you want your children to learn from watching you build and the things that you're doing?
Yeah, that's a cool question. When I started Linden Creek, there were seasons I would have like severe mom guilt. So, single mom trying to build a business that was growing really fast, which meant it was asking a lot of me in different seasons. And there were Saturdays where we would spend in the warehouse packing and unpacking accessories or receiving this new delivery and unboxing furniture. They both are great at assembling furniture now. So like kudos to them on that skill set. But I remember so many times reflecting back on that and being like, they're not swinging on a swing under a tree in our yard. Like they're in a warehouse. But I look at it today and it's interesting to see, one, they look back at those memories fondly. They're like, Mom, remember when we'd go to the warehouse on Saturdays and like we'd sneak away and we'd have tea parties and we'd put all the furniture together and build our own little homes, or we'd play hide and seek. And so those memories became beautiful for them. But what was really cool that I honestly never expected is their business acumen is quite impressive. They have had the chance to hear conversations I've had on the phone with clients, with employees, with all sorts of individuals, and the way that I speak to them, the way that I lead, the way that I handle complaints and handle accolades and wins. They've watched and talked to me about strategies around compensation and pricing strategies and cost of goods sold and the cost to acquire customers and marketing strategies. And all of these things have come up as they've just started to watch and see. And I think the biggest thing they've learned so far is if you choose to put hard work in and you stay persistent at it, because they've watched that from me each and every year, something good comes from it and you grow because of it. And so I want them to continue to build that acumen, because I think any of those business concepts that you can build and learn, whether they decide to start their own business someday or work for another organization, I hope that leads them to a different level of success because of that base knowledge. But I think another big one too is just seeing the fact that persistence and resilience is the thing that's going to grow and allow you to get to exactly where you want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's the same thing I hope my kids learn as well from watching myself and my wife. We try to take them along as often as we can to the different things that we have going on in business. And I always think like, what a different perspective that they probably have than other kids their age, or even I had growing up, that, I thought this was what you could achieve, but really there is no limit to it. So Alisa, for our listeners that want to follow your work, learn more about Linden Creek, or connect with you directly, where's the best place to find you online or on social media?
You can find us online at linden-creek.com, or on social media. We are on Instagram at Linden Creek _, or you can check me out at Alisa_Sparks _.
Awesome. Alisa, thank you so much for your time and sharing your story with us today. We really appreciate it. And to everyone listening, thank you for tuning in to Success Is. And please remember, success is not a destination. It's the journey you choose to build. Thank you.
Thanks.